shout out to all the leading ladies that have been highlighted by this day of a newspaper, Nigeria's newspaper of record, in recognition of Women's Month of March. All right, trade. The Director General of the World Trade Organization is a woman, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. So why not talk about trade? Full year for foreign trading goods for Nigeria. 37% climb, total trade 71.9, basically 72 trillion if you want to approximate. Exports climbing by 34%, 35.9 trillion. You can approximate to 36. Imports growing by 40%. Nigeria's trade surplus for the full year 2023, 44 billion naira, but it was 1.2 trillion this time in 2022. Gbemi Alonge, another leading lady who we're highlighting, is a consultant with Africa Practice, joins us now. Good morning to you, Gbemi.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And happy Women's Month, International Women's Day, and everything.
Thank you.
It's the same story every time we trade. I guess we'll go through exports and so on, but crude oil dominating. I mean, what do you make of this dynamic?
So yeah, it just, like you said, it means that Nigeria is still heavily dependent on oil. And as a result, we're still vulnerable to shocks in the oil sector. Nigeria as an economy is quite diversified. So we have the agri sector contributing 23%, the trade sector, that's domestic, contributing 12 or 13%, and then telecommunications contributing 11%. Now, crude oil, petroleum, its contribution to GDP is just 6%, right? So Nigeria's economy is quite diversified. What is not diversified is our trade, right? And as a result, we are basically at the mercy of whatever happens in the oil sector. And even though a lot of the foreign exchange coming into Nigeria doesn't only come from trade, right? The posture or the outlook of the oil sector determines how much the government gets in its coffers, determines how much it gets to spend and what happens in the rest of the economy. So it has a huge impact on the rest of the economy. If the oil sector is down, like we saw in 2016 and 2020, Nigeria is at risk of a recession or at risk of a downturn. So, I mean, I guess we're still not as diversified as we'd like to. Yeah, it's just still the same story.
Thank you for that. Okay, so I think we have the figures up now. Largest exports. I mean, Gbemi, look at this. This is, you got non-oil exports, just 8.7% of total exports. I mean, look at manufacturing, 2.2%. Again and again, we talk about these things, and you already mentioned oil and its contribution, but yet, you look at the non-oil side. What are the implications for such low numbers, basically?
So I think it's also even important to highlight some of the issues here. So one thing is, between 2019 and 2023, crude oil or non-oil exports actually reduced in terms of like its proportion. So from 12% in 2019 to 8% now as of 2023. So that in itself, is not a good look. And then another thing is, we see a situation where the value, so in Naira terms, right, our non-oil exports actually increased. But if you look at the dollar terms, right, it actually reduced.
Right.
So it reduced by around 40% in the dollar terms, right? So that means that, and typically when there is a devaluation, right, or when a country goes through some currency depreciation, that should mean well for exports, because it means that your goods are cheaper. It means that you can go into the market and be more competitive. Ask China, right? So like the fact that Naira has witnessed a depreciation in the last year should be good for exports. But what we're seeing is that, through trade and a lot of other aspects of the economy, is that doing business in Nigeria hasn't been great in the last year. So that's 40% decline was majorly between 2022 and 2023, right? So the fact that, throughout that period as well, we saw a lot of companies exit. We saw a lot of, significant shocks to the real economy. And by real economy, I mean everything outside of oil.
Right.
So, the implication of that, again, back to foreign exchange and back to just even the signals, right? What kind of signal does this send to foreign investors in terms of like the productivity of Nigeria? So that in itself, if you want to see how productive Nigeria is, also look at the non-oil sector, right, and our exports. The fact that even when our goods are cheaper on paper, we cannot sell more to the rest of the world just
Right.
speaks to the kind of productivity in the country and just how exposed we are in terms of like our foreign exchange inflows and other aspects of the economy.
When we look at the number of the countries we traded with, it's your Netherlands, China, US, and so on. It's very small proportion of trade. And again, this comes up again and again. Very small portion is with other African countries. And so what does that mean within the context of the free continental trade agreement and so on?
I mean, a country's trade partners, largely depends on what they're trading in.
Yeah.
So Nigeria trades in, we export crude oil. We're looking forward to Dangote changing that soon.
Yeah.
We export a lot of crude, and that's what we depend on a lot. And we import a lot of refined petroleum. We import, so I think refined petroleum makes up about 30-something% of our imports. Then we also import like vehicles, we import machinery, right? So the reason why our trade partners are the way, who they are is because of what we're trying to import and who we're exporting to. So, apart from Dangote refinery, there isn't that much refining activity going on in Africa. So even if we were to trade our crude, it's unlikely that we'll trade it within Africa, right? And when we're buying our, vehicles and our machinery, it's unlikely that we're buying it from Africa again.
Right.
So, to a large extent, right, Africa's Continental Free Trade Agreement it has a lot of potential for Africa. But the people who will win, it increases the market for Nigerian businesses and Nigerian producers. It expands, the potential for several African economies. But people who will benefit the most are those that will go beyond providing the raw materials, the mineral resources, that's, almost everyone. Countries in Africa that do a lot of trade, they mostly export raw materials.
Yeah.
There isn't that much manufacturing going on the continent. So it's unlikely that a lot of our trade will swing to African countries from our current trade partners. But last week the Nigerian arm or Nigerian office of AFCFTA actually announced that Nigeria would start this month, at the end of the month. There will be some sort of trade at the end of March or April. There will be some trade with Africa with South Africa under the agreement, right? So there's a lot of activity going on. A lot of manufacturers and just even businesses as a whole are looking to tap into this. But it's important for us the winners will be those who can go beyond providing raw materials to actually manufacturing, because that's what most African countries need.
Thank you for the breakdown. We only got less than a minute to go. How do we get more Gbemi Alonges, more female analysts in Europe? I want you to say something about, I guess, Women's Day and I guess your field, because I bother you a lot to come on the show. You're always busy. And every top female analyst I talk to, they're always stressed. I'm going here, there. So how do we inspire the next generation of female analysts to, what's the significance of International Women's Day?
I think highlighting the opportunities is very important. Thank you for having me. Thank you for always calling me. I think actively, so there has to be some sort of, at the beginning, there has to be some sort of affirmative action, for the lack of a better word. Actively going out to find the people who can provide the insights, going out to find those who can, and making your platform, I guess, conducive enough for people like me. So, as much as possible, just creating more space for other people.
Well said. Said. Gbemi Alonge, consultant with Africa Practice. Really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for your insights on trade. Always very much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.